All right, what is up, everybody? So today we are going to look at higher order functions. The four commonly used ones are transform, filter, exist, and aggregate. So this let us operate and process complex data types such as arrays or nested arrays, as well as maps. So in Databricks, higher order functions allows us to operate on arrays without having to explode them, right? So without having to create multiple rows for each element inside of the array. Okay, so first thing we need to do, we're gonna need some data. I created a temporary view called shows. So these are the popular shows on Netflix. We have Wednesday, The Witcher, and Stranger Things. And for the arrays, we'll just use three characters. We'll have Wednesday, Pugsley, and Tyler. For the Wednesday, for The Witcher, we have Gerald, Siri, Jaskier. Stranger Things, we have 11, Dustin, and Mike. So let's go ahead and run that view. View, we need a cluster. I'll just use serverless. So it'll be pretty quick. Okay. While that's loading up, we're just gonna go ahead and, nope, it's done. Just run our view. And first thing we want to do is look at the data itself. So while that's running, I'll go ahead and type in select star from our view shows, and let's have a look. Okay, so our view has two columns, title and names. And if you look at names, it is a data type array, right? So we have an array of characters for each row. So that's awesome. All right, so the first one that we're gonna look at is transform. So what transform does, it you can apply your logic to every element in the array, and then it returns a new array. So let's go ahead and do that. Or select our title, and then we will use the transform function. Transform, and the first argument is the array itself. So the name of the array is names, and then we'll pass in the element. What do we want to do in that for that element? Let's say we just want uppercase the element itself, and then we'll finish up our SQL statement. So from shows. Okay, so let me kind of walk you through the code. So here we're selecting the title, and then we're using the transform function. We're passing in the array, and we're trying to apply a function for each element in the array. And I just called it X. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it I, Z, or whatever. And then we'll apply the function upper to each of those elements. So that should give us uppercase for each character name. So for example, Wednesday, the Wednesday will be uppercase, Pugsley's and Tyler. So let's look at that. Okay, perfect. So all the names, all the characters in the names column is uppercase. Let me just give that a alias. Uppercase names. It looks a little bit cleaner. All right, there you go. All right, so that is transform. Again, you can apply whatever logic to it, to each element, and then it will return a new array for us. All right, that's awesome. Next, we will look at the filter function. So what filter does, it removes element that doesn't satisfy the condition that we put in, right? So for example, I already put in the code here, pretty much the same thing as transform. We're selecting the title, and then we're gonna apply the filter function, and then we are going to pass in the array, which is names, and then for each element, X is X like Wednesday, right? So we're basically saying as that element contains Wednesday. Well, what this does, it will return as our new array, right? Consisting of Wednesday. And if it doesn't have Wednesday, it's just going to be a blank array. Let's run that. All right. So We know Wednesday has Wednesday, so returns us that. The Witcher does not have when, right? The like when, so it returns us blank, as well as Stranger Things. All right, that is awesome. So next we will look at the exist function, and it's kind of similar to filter, but except it returns a Boolean, right? True or false. It's commonly used for flags and conditions. If you want to add a flag to your table, you can do that, or any conditions, right? So let's go ahead and select our title. Again, they're going to be pretty much the same thing. Since we looked at transform and filter, you should be pretty much comfortable with the exist function. Similar to it, we'll pass in the array names and what we want to do, right? So we want to say is that array equals to, let's say we're looking at, I don't know, Pugsley. So that should return us Wednesday, because Pugsley is in Wednesday, right? Let's give it a name. So it has Pugsley, Pugsley. All right, funny name. All right, from shows, there we go. Just clean it up a little bit. Okay, so that should return us true for the Wednesday title, right? So again, we got the Boolean value, true, false, and false. All right, that's great. So far, we've only looked at data that has one object, right? Meaning it's just an array. It's not nested array, right? So we have Wednesday, Pugsley, and Tyler just with one array. So next we'll look at array with more than one object, and we'll use the aggregate functions. And what aggregate function does, it works like a reduce or a fold operation. So we need to create a new temporary view. So we'll have orders ID, which is 1, 2, 3, and we'll have the items array, and inside the array we'll have a new array or name struct to be specific. We'll have name, smartphone, price is $6.99. Right, so we have objects inside the array. Let's go ahead and run this view. Now let's look at our data. For items from that should give us an array, right? So this is array, but it's an array of objects. So we have multiple objects here, right? We have multiple items. We have smartphone, price $6.99, laptop price $1,699, monitor price $399, right? Okay, so first, let's go ahead and kind of look at some of the things that we already know, right? Like the transform. Before we use the aggregate, let's look at how we can use transform into array of objects. So let's go ahead and select. Let's go ahead and pick our order ID, right? So let's say we want to transform the items and then the name. So we're not transforming, we're just selecting names. So this should give us just names, right? So we're not doing any uppercase or nothing like that. So let's see what we get. This should only give us names without the price, right? Okay, perfect. So we have just the name. So if you want to just pull out the names, you can do that. And if you want to just get the price, you can do that as well. And that should give you the price. So great. So now we can pick and choose what we want, right? Either the name or the price or both if you'd like. Okay, perfect. So what we were going to do, right? Let's just do a transform so you can kind of see. So let's call it upper X, upper names. You can see that it does. Oh, I gotta pass in names. Gotta pass in the name x.name. There you go. All right, we'll accept what Databricks is telling us. All right, so we were able to use the transform and pass in a function called upper to a nested object, right? Earlier, we were just passing it into just a single object. All right, so that's great. Now let's go into using the aggregate function, right? So To do that, let me just go ahead and type it in, and then I'll kind of talk you through the code. So we'll do order ID. Oh my God, autocomplete sometimes really is not your friend. All right, so let's call in the aggregate function. Aggregate. Okay, so this is pretty much what we looked at earlier. We're gonna pass in the array. So the array is items. And what's different here is we're gonna have to pass in the start value, right? Because we're gonna accumulate that. So we're gonna have this kind of like a variable called ACC or accumulator. And we're going to start it from 0. So we just add on to that 0, right? So we can accumulate the value. So let's say we start from 0, right? We'll have accumulator and then our element. And what do we want to do, right? So we want to add the price of that element to our accumulator. So we can have like a total sum, right? Total order price. So we'll do the arrow. We'll say accumulator plus the price of that element, right? Because you have to be, because this is a nested object, so we have to use the dot operator to go inside of that element. So we'll say x that price, and let's give it a name. We'll call it total order price, because each row, right, this is order. Each row is an order, and we have multiple items inside of that order, and we're just going to try to add in the price of that item. So we'll call it total order price. Okay, so this should give us the sum of all the price per order. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, perfect. So we summed up, just put price there so we know that price. So we pretty much summed up the price for the first order, 699 plus 1,699 plus 399. All right, so we just summed those up. Now let's kind of validate it, right? Let's just add them up and see if you got the right number. Plus 699 plus 399. So this should give us the first order, or order 1. 2797. We got 2797. All right, that is awesome. So that's it. We went through different functions, high order functions, right? So we looked at, let's see, we looked at transform, we looked at filter, exist, and aggregate. Again, this is really useful if you don't want to explode your array, right? You can just operate